What were you thinking? You ever heard that question at the office when something went awry? Welcome back to WowBiz Nebraska. I'm Lynn Hinderrock. I'm going to talk with you a little bit about our thinking apparatus, our thinking style, or our brain, obviously, and how it all applies to getting out of this pandemic malaise, shall we say, getting it through this phase, and how to accelerate and do the right thing in the right timing to really make the most of the year in front of us, 2021. So we're going to backstop here a little bit. I'm going to talk to you about two gentlemen that have been pivotal in my life. I've never met them, of course, but they've developed some insight into the human brain that I've found extremely important as I go throughout my life as a professional, as a consultant, a speaker, and also leading teams of people. All right? Now, I'm going to talk to you right now about Roger Sperry, who is a brain physiologist and neuropsychologist, Mr. Roger Sperry. We're going back now to the 60s, maybe 70s as well, and Mr. Ned Herman. And he was a management trainer within GE's management development, kind of a think tank environment. Again, we're going back to the 60s. These gentlemen discovered something that is true to this day, although like everything else, it gets debated periodically. And essentially this, we all know and we knew then that the human brain was divided into two halves. That's kind of common knowledge. And it's joined by something across the top of our skull. Everybody's the same in this way, of course, and it's called the Corpus Callosum, and it joins the left and the right brain. And over the years, people have noticed that the left and the right half of the brain operate differently, and they enable us to think in different ways. But Sperry and Ned Herman back then had kind of a breakthrough. They realized or found out through a lot of research that our brain is actually quadrants. It has four sections. Each, the right brain and the left half of the brain, both have two halves in them, or four total, instead of just two total. And this is a huge, huge insight into why leaders in business organizations make the decisions that they do, both good ones and bad ones. All right, now let me tell you, each of these quadrants, you have to become somewhat familiar with them as I go forward here for the next few minutes, 8 or 9 minutes. What they learned was that in the right half of the brain, there are two sections, as I mentioned. They color-coded them. The red quadrant, which is in the right half of the brain, has to do with emotion and empathy. This is what salespeople are great at. They can hang out with a client and finish their sentences before they even get through them, and they kind of have a feel for people. And those are salespeople, and you always have to have them in your organization. Everybody knows that. Now we're going to shift for a second over to the left half of the brain, where there are two segments, of course, as I implied earlier. One is the segment that is green. Well, again, we're color coding it, don't take me literally, but that portion of the brain does the kind of process thinking that middle managers in companies pride themselves on. They're very focused on how to manage a project and how to get from A to Z and all the details and the things that go into moving a project to completion. Those are the kinds of people that you find, and they prefer that portion of their brain. Now there's another portion of the brain, as I mentioned earlier, that is the blue portion of the brain. And these are the people that kind of, quote, hang out there or utilize that portion of the brain a lot, are technical people, detail-oriented people, typically tech people, financial people, people focused on details, tangible details. All right? And obviously, those two sections there are all about logic and science and breaking things down into small segments and proceeding in an orderly fashion through whatever project is in front of them. So I've mentioned three now. I've mentioned one on the right half of the brain, the sales, red. I've mentioned the green, the process middle managers. And I've mentioned the blue, the technical people, CFOs, attorneys, people like that. However, there's a section or a quadrant on the right half of the brain that I've not mentioned now, and Ned Herman labeled them the yellow brains. These are the people they use that color to kind of identify that section of the brain. And these people, we're going to talk about the yellow brains, quote unquote, right? We're going to talk about them. These people are different, right? They're entrepreneurs, number one. They are big picture people, visionary people. When a project is laid in front of them, then they typically get from A to Q, maybe all the way to Z, before anybody else has even attended 1 or 2 meetings. So they get way ahead of most of the groups that they're a part of. As I mentioned before, they're futuristic. In some ways, they're people of few words. They're idea people. And they rely on abstract thinking, principles, theories, concepts, very important to them, as opposed to the people on the left half of the brain that rely on detail and tangible, logical, specific, scientific things. People who are yellow brains are dominated by that portion of the brain. They prefer to think in that fashion, let's put it that way. Very, very creative people. Not afraid to start 16 different projects and see where they all go. And oftentimes, and I don't want to belabor this, oftentimes what they excel at is seeing connections and relationships between diverse things, research, people, some guy said that, a cartoon, whatever it is, things that nobody else would even put together, and they're seeing that they are part of a pattern, And by the way, these people are invaluable insofar as developing new products, right? Or seeing a market that's being underserved, and if we just take this product and add this service and add this onto it, we can serve this new market segment and make a lot of money. So this is a very interesting group of people. I mentioned before, these are entrepreneurs. Also women, by the way, tend to think in this fashion. They're comfortable with having multiple things going on around them and then pulling them together ad hoc and seeing something come out of it. Most men, left-brained, as you probably know, are more sequential. They're not interested in all this other stuff floating around that may or may not be relevant. So you can see how a yellow brain could be, let me say, breakthrough potential, but also disruptive. If you're trying to run a company in a very organized and orderly fashion, and everything has to be sequenced, and everybody's got their job description, so when you bring a yellow brain into the culture, things can get exciting and maybe a little bit disruptive, right? Because they're not interested in all the policies and procedures. They're interested in getting from A to Z. They're interested in getting to the future. So what happens when you have a yellow brain in your culture? Well, you have a lot of great ideas coming at you, right? Possibly. You're more relevant because these people are tuned into trends and consumers and end users, and they're thinking about stuff that you're not thinking about very often. However, when they bring you something and say, hey, here's an opportunity, you may or may not be thrilled. You might say, well, I'm already busy. I've got a million things. I'm behind on my work. I don't want to have to attack yet another opportunity. And that's what these people do, is they identify opportunities. Now, in the past, all through the 70s, 80s, really into the 90s, if you were a yellow brain, you were not appreciated. You kind of were escorted out the door. But here we are as we wrap up the pandemic. We're at the back end of this trend, this incredible wave, changing everything in a lot of ways. Now, yellow brain thinking, those kinds of strategic entrepreneurs could be invaluable for you, whether they're consultants from outside the company or you have them inside on your team, on your staff. So make sure that you have yellow brain thinkers, so to speak, the people that kind of focus on abstract ideas, concepts, trends, and are able to pull things together and see the connections between the dots. That's the future. That's how you get out of the malaise, the stalled, restless, and unhappy culture and situation that you're in right now. Remember the yellow brains, women and entrepreneurs, you need them now. They'll get you going. All right, my name is Lynn Hinderrocker. This is WowBiz Nebraska. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've learned a lot. We've met Marcus. We've talked about Jim Beatty, Golf Ventures. Don't forget, check him out. And finally, think about yellow brains, about weaving them into your culture, even if you have to get a consultant or a coach to come in and help you out. Thanks again. We'll see you next time on WowBiz Nebraska.